Are you aware of the National School Chaplains Association?
I've heard of them.
They testified in favor of the bill both in the House and in the Senate. Are you aware that the stated purpose of this organization is, quote, to enhance his presence by infiltrating the system and supporting Christians functioning and operating inside the school systems?
I'm not advised. What I'm aware of is that what this bill does is allow school districts to determine whether or not they want to allow chaplains as hired or volunteer personnel.
To be a school counselor in Texas, you have to have a master's degree. Are we requiring that school chaplains have a master's degree in this bill?
I don't believe so.
School counselors have to teach in Texas public schools for 2 years in a classroom before they can be a school counselor. Are we requiring the chaplains teach in a classroom for 2 years before becoming a school chaplain?
In the definition of the chaplains that we had before, chaplains go through extensive training.
I'm looking at the website of the organization I mentioned earlier, National School Chaplains Association. They admit on their website that the training is, quote, minimal. It includes a 48-hour program that's equivalent to 1 college credit. That doesn't sound extensive to me.
Joining us now is Texas State Representative James Talarico, who you just saw in those clips. Also joining me is Michelle Goldberg, opinion columnist for the New York Times and author of Kingdom Coming, The Rise of Christian Nationalism. Thank you both for joining me tonight. Representative Talarico, first of all, I think a lot of people in Texas are probably very thankful for the line of questioning and the oratory that you've given on the subject of a lot of these bills. How do your Republican counterparts in the State House manage this line of criticism, that this is nothing more than a blatant attempt to install white Christian nationalism in the public school system?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Alex, and thank you for covering this really important topic. I sometimes have Republican colleagues who approach me in private after these exchanges on the House floor and committee and thank me for my questioning. We still got common sense Republicans here in our state who, are being dragged to the right by MAGA Republicans, by Christian nationalists in their primaries. And so there are some who are thankful that representatives like me are speaking out against these efforts, but we have to have folks in the Republican Party speak out as well. Otherwise, we're going to have Christian nationalists infiltrating our schools and indoctrinating our children.
Is there any sense of contrition or apology or sheepishness about the fact that this is so blatantly an attempt to basically indoctrinate children and it's effectively religious indoctrination? Is there any attempt to hide that?
No, the extreme Republicans who are pushing these different measures are pretty shameless in their objectives, which are to indoctrinate our kids. Governor Abbott here in our state is fond of saying that schools are for education, not indoctrination. And what I can't figure out is why having a rainbow in your classroom is considered indoctrination and having the 10 Commandments in your classroom is not. This legislative session has been all about parental rights, and they've used that to discriminate against gay kids. They've used it to defund our schools with voucher scams. And so when I had this bill come before the Public Education Committee, I asked, would the Republican author be open to requiring parental consent before religious commandments could be posted in the classroom? And she refused. So I don't know why parental consent is necessary when we're trying to teach things like empathy and kindness or basic sex education, but parental consent is not necessary when we are literally indoctrinating our students into one particular faith tradition.
Yeah, Michelle, I'm struck. I'm old enough to remember when you couldn't say my goal is explicitly to introduce Christian indoctrination into the public school system. If you listen to these representatives in Texas, if you listen to Tommy Tuberville, who is a United States senator, the embrace of white Christian nationalism it's transparent, it's above board, there's almost nothing to be ashamed of, except it's kind of awkward when you remind people that Nazism and white Christian nationalism actually have quite a bit of overlap. Is this the inevitable endpoint of all of this in your mind?
So you mentioned that book that I wrote about Christian nationalism. That book came out in 2006. And when that book came out, I could, even though that book was meant to raise an alarm, I couldn't have imagined then the extent to which this sort of thing would be mainstreamed. Because back then you heard these ideas, but you heard them at obscure conferences. Maybe a few backbench members of the Republican Party would get on board. Certainly not senators, and certainly not the president of the United States and his family. I mean, the thing that is so striking to me about the Reawaken America tour is, as you said, it's not, oh my God, we've discovered that there are people who've praised Hitler, who've said, I believe that one of them said the same people, Hitler was fighting the same people that we're trying to fight, which actually is true. But they don't say, well, we want to distance ourselves from this. We have to cancel this event. It's let's just cancel these two people for this one event. So let's make sure that we have 2 degrees of separation from people who praise Hitler instead of 1 degree. And I think that what they've made pretty clear is that white Christian nationalists are an integral part of their base, that they can't get elected without them, that they believe that they need to flatter them and appeal to them. And going back to what the congressman said, or what the representative said, of course, it's never been about the rights of all parents. It's been about the rights of a very specific group of parents who this movement believes have the right to kind of control all our institutions, just as this movement has always believed that white Christians have, sort of a special role to play in this country and are kind of more American than everybody else.
Representative, I got to ask you, I mean, I understand that there's an ideology that lays at the foundation of all of this, but there also seems to be a political reality. And I'm wondering if you can weigh in on this. The Washington Post reports that Republicans have a lock on power, but the state continues inexorably moving away from them culturally and demographically. This is the state of Texas. I think this is the death rattle of a dying worldview. That's a quote from you. In some ways, the far right is like a wounded animal here in Texas. They know Texas is becoming increasingly diverse, it's becoming younger, and that new Texas is not going to stand for these extreme policies. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? And do you really, I think a lot of us have been waiting for that moment when Texas does. There's always every 4 years, Texas is turning blue, Texas is turning blue. It hasn't happened yet. And do you think the groundswell of progressive support to push back on these policies will amass in time to actually stop them? Because Republicans have had a frightening amount of success with actually instituting these policies.
Well, as an 8th generation Texan, I am begging you and other folks watching across the country not to give up on our great state. Mitt Romney beat President Obama here by double digits in 2012, but President Trump only won this state by 5 points in 2020. And so our state is moving in the right direction, and we need more help, more support to ensure that we have a Texas that's worthy of the next generation. I just want to say I'm a Christian myself. My granddad was a Baptist preacher in South Texas. I still attend the same church where I was baptized when I was 4 years old. These bills are not only unconstitutional, they're not only un-American, they're also deeply un-Christian. Christian nationalism is an oxymoron. When Jesus was tempted by the devil out in the wilderness, one of the things the devil offered was political power. He offered all the kingdoms in the world, and Jesus rejected it. This is a religion of universal love and inclusion, and these bills are the exact opposite of that. They are arrogant, they are exclusionary, and they're idolatrous. And so I think it's incumbent upon Christians to speak out against people who are trying to pervert our faith in the name of Christ.
Yeah, I think that point is so well taken. Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you have to embrace Christian nationalism, in the same way that just because you're a patriot doesn't mean you have to embrace jingoism. Representative Tallarico, do you sense is there any sense of irony or hypocrisy that is felt on the part of these Republicans in your state, that the titular head of their party is the least Christian person we've probably had in the Oval Office? I mean, is there ever any explanation for that, given the zealotry with which they approach the tenets of the so-called Christian ideology?
I think I remember former President Trump being asked to name his favorite Bible verse, and he answered all of it. So yeah, it doesn't seem like that irony has sunk in. But in the past week here in Texas, we've experienced yet another deadly mass shooting where children were killed, and this is not even a year since the massacre in Uvalde, Texas. The Republican Party here in our state during this legislative session has talked a big game about protecting children. They're banning books in the name of protecting children. They are discriminating against LGBTQ people in the name of protecting children, banning drag queens in the name of protecting children. And yet they won't lift a finger to address the number one cause of death for children in the United States, which is gun violence. So the hypocrisy runs deep in the Republican Party here in our state. And it's going to take all of us to call it out, to expose it, and ultimately to beat them at the ballot box.
Texas State Representative James Talarico and the always wonderful Michelle Goldberg, thank you both for your time and thoughts tonight. Really appreciate it.